Hi guys. In this method, in the previous method, we deployed the CLI way of pod deployment. In this one, we'll be using the manifest method. So manifest method is more of understanding about how you can deploy the pods using YAML, but it's like an automation. Like think of it like you want to deploy 100 pods. You can't be writing CLI commands 100 times. So it uses YAML, but it's easy to use. The formula for YAML, to understand YAML, is it's an complex thing, frankly, but it's based on only three principles. So it says string format, where you give a key and a value. Um, the listing format, there is a key, and then this is value 1, 2, and 3. And then you have mapping format, where you give a map, where you give a key, primary key, and then you give the values for that key. uh, what most important with YAML is that the spacing and indentation, and it's all lowercase. Now for that, what I do is I use something called Visual Studio. So if you look at this Visual Studio code quickly, and if I so if the string format, this one is like the fruit is orange, it's key value. The listing format is the vegetables. What most important over here is the spacing. If you look here, there are many online tools where you give the code and they can fix it for you, but I usually prefer Visual Studio. What is the food? That's your key, and then you have a vegetable called tomatoes, and then under that you have fruit, which is again in a listing format. So this is a mapping format. If you look carefully, it covers both string and listing. So that's how usually written. Having said that, it's I understand it's easy to go through this, but when you try and deploy, you would see many challenges. But the more you do, the more you will learn. So let's get going with our master node, and let's see how it is implemented. Now first, let's see if we have any pods running, which is not. Now, what the interesting part with Kubernetes is that if you don't know YAML, that's fine. There are predefined pods. Whenever you give an instruction to execute a pod, you would see there is a YAML file created by default in the background, which gets stored in etcd. So, for example, this command kubectl run the test pod. I'll be using nginx image. We'll do a dry run equals to client, and just show me the YAML format. So it's not executing it, it will just show me the format. So if you look here, there's a particular format over here. We'll cover most of the key values, but let's first understand one by one what those are, and then we will go ahead with the rest of them. Okay, now let's save this YAML file. We'll understand what that is doing in a bit, but I'm just trying to showcase how easy they have done for us so that we can implement it. So let's say I'm just saving it as pod1 dot YAML file. Make sure the extension is there. I'll just show you pod1, and pod1 YAML is there. If I just show you kubectl get pod, there is nothing running yet. It just copied the YAML file. And if I just say kubectl create minus, I don't know why I right click it. It creates the pod, and if I just show you the pod, it is there. So we just copied that YAML file, and it ran um, and it deployed the pod. So that's how the YAML is called and deployed. But let's dive deep a little bit. Now let me just show you the significance of Um, Let me just delete this code. Great. I still have my file. Let me just open up this file. And let's say I change. What I'm trying to prove over here is that there is a significance of each line over here. If I try to provision, it will slap me an error saying that the version is a mismatch. Let's say I try to make it insert. I make a value as, I'll make it back, change it back to version 1, and let's say I make one of the values as uppercase, GINX, right? If I try, it did, but let me just delete. I just made a change at the wrong place. So let's say containers image. These keywords are actually important, and if you change them, there is an error. So what I'm trying to say is that these keywords on the left hand side, which are in blue, there is a proper indentation, spacing, which matters a lot, and there is a place where we can see where they are described. So in the next scene, or in the next video, you will just see quickly what that place is and how exactly it is executed in the background. So what I'm trying to say over here is that there are certain keywords, like there is a word pod which is somewhere defined over here, and if I change the sequence, let's say if I make the restart policy on the top and bring the metadata down, then also it will fail. So there is a proper syntax to run this, and what we gonna see is that what exactly is that place where this all is defined, right? So let me go there. Now I have opened up two tabs for the master node. I'm on the master node. If I open up the YAML file which I saved previously, um, we want to understand why is this YAML file written in this particular sequence, right? Um, and if I just show you the other one, if I come here, there is a command which is already there. Our concern was where exactly is the pod being defined, right? So if I run the command kubectl API resources, you will see the kind, under kind you will see something called pod. So that's where the pod, the API resources for pod is being defined. Another thing is that whenever you run the command pod kubectl get pod, you can also run po instead of pods. So if I show you the file, the YAML file, so it has a kind pod, but how do we investigate like what exactly is the format for that file pod, right? So if I run another command, now because we are running, or we are trying to deploy a pod, so kubectl please explain the API resource called pod, right? And if you press enter, you would see the formatting for that. So the formatting, if you compare here, it says API version, kind, metadata, spec, and then you have in the last it says status. So if I come here, it has the same format: API version, kind, metadata, specs, and status. So that's where the API resources have defined the value, or the syntax you can call it, of that. Now if you want to know why, for example, under specs, why is containers written in this format, you can also go a little deep inside, so I can just say pod dot, and if I come here and just say for example specs, I want to understand the formatting for specs, for example, right? So I'll just say spec, and it will give me the formatting for specs over here, right? So if you look here under specs, they have defined container, which is um, which is in a listing format. So in the specs they have something called container. So if you come here quickly, ABCD, that's where your list of containers are. Now if you want to go a little more under specs, you want to know what containers is or what is the format for container, we'll put another, like you guessed it correctly, you'll say containers, and then you will get a format for containers. And what we have mentioned in the containers is images. So if I quickly show you image, that's where the format is. So there is a sequence. That particular sequence is actually mentioned. So under container, you can also put a life cycle, right? So I can come here and actually say life cycle, right? So hyphen life cycle, or probes, life cycle probes, or liveliness probe. So that's how it is defined. Now we'll skip the part of what we have not studied yet. So I'll just say, we'll keep the part where it says, metadata is fine, creation time, I'll just keep it blank. We'll cover up labels later on, and we'll just say remove it and keep the name as insert. I'll just say get the devo1, right? um, Under specs container, we'll just keep it same, and I'll just say image to be, instead of nginx, I'll just say, I have shown you on the Docker Hub there is an image called httpd. That's what I want to pull, and I'll just keep the name same as test. Rest I don't need. I'll just remove them, get rid of it. Right, now I'll give the path. I'll say kubectl create -f pod1 yaml, and I think it has created. Now kubectl get po pods, you will see -oy, you will see it has been created. So we'll cover up the rest of the part of the syntax as we go forward, but I just wanted to show what was necessary. A quick look at the YAML file. It just have it's saying I'm pod, that's from API resources, and these are the naming conventions, that's the name it took. The HTTPD is the service it is running, and the name of the container uh, is test. I'm sorry, the last one is actually the DNS label. So if I this is if I do a cat on my YAML file, you will see that this is a name over there. If I ask the kubectl to explain me what that name is, it says I am a DNS label. Under metadata also there is a name called dev01, that's the container name. So if I just ask it what exactly are you, man, so it will tell us that it is a name created under a namespace dev01. One last thing I want to cover, every namespace created under API resources, the default ones, they have something called a scope. So uh, where you say namespace as true and false, that's basically telling you about the scope of that resource. So for example, true means a namespace, and false mean basically the scope of that particular application is towards that namespace, and false means it's cluster wide. So under under you will see, under pods, for example, under kind you will see something pod. Pod means it says I'm true, which means it's restricted to its own namespace and not the cluster wide. um, yeah. So what's the benefit of understanding scope? When we study roles and resources, then we'll cover up more about what exactly is the difference between namespace and cluster wide. So that's how we move forward. Thank you.